what is fungus? So, to introduce what it is and the role it plays in the body and how it affects the body, we need to be looking at microorganisms. And microorganisms, as the name implies, are microscopic. Organism means that they are living. Microscopic means you cannot see it with the naked eye. And these microorganisms are everywhere. They're in the air we're breathing, they're on every surface area, they're on our skin, they're in our body. We have 100 trillion cells in the body, and there are 10 times more microorganisms in the body than cells, and there are 10 times more microorganisms in the gastrointestinal tract than anywhere else in the body. They're everywhere. They're part of life. In fact, as some claim, they are life. So they're everywhere. And whenever cell damage happens, these microorganisms have the ability to change roles. And when you think about it, we change roles. We change roles all through life. I'm not dressed now the way I'm dressed when I'm in Thailand. It's hot. I'm not dressed now the way I'm dressed when I'm sleeping at night. I'm not dressed now the way I'm dressed when I'm digging in the garden. I'm not dressed now the way I was dressed 2 weeks ago when Michael and I went to our daughter's wedding. We change roles, and we change roles according to the environment, and so do the microorganisms. And whenever cell damage happens, they change roles. They now become, as what one microbiologist said to me, we call them the garbage collectors, or you could call them the cleanup team. The garbage collectors are taking away the garbage, or you could call it the trash or the rubbish. And their name is bacteria. That's what bacteria is, that's what it does. As the environment changes, so do they change. They now become the exterminators. So the name of the exterminators, this is the yeast, this is the fungus, and also another one that needs a host, like the yeast and the fungus do, a virus. As the environment changes, so do they. They now become the undertakers. What do the undertakers do? They take away dead things. And the name of the undertakers is mould. And that's what mould does. And what mould does, it's part of the cycle that brings matter back to dust. And what I have drawn for you here is the cycle of life. And the cycle of life is a cycle that brings matter back to dust. What I have drawn for you here is just the cycle of life. And the cycle of life states, nothing is created, nothing's destroyed. It just changes form. And what does the preacher say at the funeral? Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. What's he referring to? He's referring to what's about to happen in the coffin. The matter is about to be brought back to dust. It's the carbon cycle or the cycle of life. Understanding this is paramount. It's essential in understanding what the true cause of disease is. Louis Pasteur made the theory famous in about the mid-1800s that germs cause disease. Florence Nightingale, very famous nurse from the same time, he was in France, she was in England. She said, this is the theory of a man of a very unstable mind. And anyone who believes it is equally unstable, germs don't cause disease, they're the result. They're the result of unhealthful conditions. Let me tell you Florence Nightingale's story. At the age of 28, she was brought up in a very wealthy home. She was brought up to go to parties and sew fine seams and paint watercolours, which she did not like. But her father, he educated Florence, and she loved it. She loved to study. And at the age of 28, she was praying one morning and God spoke to her. God wanted her to work for him. She was excited, but she didn't know what she was to do. And the only time she was happy is when she was taking food parcels to the poor people in the little villages. In fact, she asked her parents if she could work in a hospital. They were horrified. Young ladies do not do such things. But she had a friend, who was a friend of the family's, who was a doctor, who overseed a clinic in Europe looking after young ladies who fainted. And so she got permission to go and work there for a little while with this doctor, and she loved it. She loved the logistics, she loved the organisation. And so it was in, I think it was 1854, when Florence was 33, there was a crisis in the hospital in Scutari. So where's Scutari? So the Crimean War was happening, and in the Crimean War, the British and the French were fighting the Russians. And this is the Black Sea. They were put in boats, sailed down the Black Sea to the port at Scutari, and Scutari is where the hospital was. It really was a makeshift hospital. It was ex-army Turkish barracks. And a war correspondent went there to report on the war effort, and he was shocked. He was shocked at the conditions in this hospital. There was raw sewage in the corridors. So he went back and he wrote a newspaper article, front line. It said, "Did we raise our young men to die like this?" In fact, the report was that the French were being better looked after than the British. So the British government asked Florence and 35 nurses to go to Scutari and see what they could do. When she got to Scutari, she was horrified. The doctors wouldn't let her come in. They said, "This is men's business." So they let her go to the kitchen. And in the kitchen, it was filthy. There were big vats of water with bits of rotten meat in it. That was the food. The death rate in the hospital in Scutari was 50%. In fact, the men had a better chance of survival on the front line that they had in that hospital. The doctors were not washing their hands between operations. So it was about this time Florence just went and started scrubbing the kitchen. But she also telegrammed the British government. She knew her limitations as a woman in 1854. She said, "You need to set up a sanitary commission to come and assess the situation." But meanwhile, another boat of wounded arrived, 1,200 wounded men. The hospital was already overflowing. And so the doctor said to Florence, "All right, you can come in." And the first thing she did, she started cleaning. She got her nurses to start cleaning and scrubbing. She found a young man that was still in his battle clothes 2 weeks after he'd been admitted to hospital. She insisted that the doctors wash their hands between operations. They thought, well, we're already covered in blood. What's the point? Why did Florence Nightingale know about these basic cleanliness laws and they didn't? Florence read her Bible, and she had read that in Leviticus, God gave strict cleanliness rules to Moses in the desert with these millions of people. In fact, if someone had died, they had to be taken out of the camp, buried in a deep hole, and the people that carried them out of the camp, they weren't allowed back in the camp for 3 days. They had to wash their clothes, they had to wash their bodies. You see, when someone dies, immediately these microorganisms get busy because their role is to bring matter back to dust. In fact, if you wanted to go to the bathroom, you had to go outside the camp, dig a hole, bury it, and no one could know that you'd been there. The report is, in 40 years, this refugee camp, and that's what it was, of millions of people, there was no sickness. The only death was really from old age. And in the book, The Ministry of Healing, there's a very interesting chapter. Actually, there's many interesting chapters, but one of the chapters is hygiene amongst the Israelites. And in that chapter, the author has taken all of those Bible quotes to show you these basic cleanliness rules. So the sanitary mission came. They quickly assessed the situation, were horrified. What they found is that the hospital was built in a swamp. They found a dead horse in the swamp. That is a horse. They found a dead dog in the swamp. And the men in the hospital were drinking water out of that swamp. What an incredible body we live in. I'm shocked that the death rate wasn't 80%. We live in an incredible body that's got this inbuilt drive to keep us alive. That's why once you start working with it, once you start giving it the right conditions, you will be excited and encouraged to see how it starts to work better. And so immediately they got rid of the dead dog and the dead horse. They immediately got men to actually work with the plumbing, get the draining, start boiling the water. Meanwhile, Florence had telegrammed her father and asked for a shipload of clean linen, clean bandages, scrubbing brushes, and a cook. You cannot heal without nourishment. So with all of these changes implemented, within 2 months, the death rate went from 50% to 2%. We can't forget Florence Nightingale. This is 80 years before antibiotics. She was getting incredible results. And when she went back to London 14 months later, she looked off the boat and she saw these big celebrations hailing her as a heroine. She saw Queen Victoria, Prince Albert. I'm sure the brass band was there. She changed her name to Mary Smith and went down the back gangplank and went home. They said, "Why did you do that?" She said, "I'm not a heroine." She said, "All I did was increase hygiene, sanitation, and nutrition." Hygiene, that's personal hygiene. Wash the body every day. Wash your clothes every day. Especially, you mightn't wash your outer coats every day, but what's touching the body? Because waste is continually being thrown off via our skin. That's hygiene, personal hygiene. Sanitation, keep the house clean, sweep the floor every day, empty the rubbish, you call it the trash can every day, scrub your bathroom regularly. Today we see it as basic common sense, don't we? She said, all I did was increase hygiene, sanitation and nutrition. Your body cannot heal without nutrition. That's why she said to her father, we need a cook. We need someone to make nutritious food so these soldiers can heal. Her reforms were mighty, and yet how simple. They are incredibly simple. Let me give you a graph. All the childhood illnesses, mumps, measles, rubella, whooping cough, tetanus, polio, did you know that they were 80%, sometimes 90% reduction, and then the childhood shots were introduced? Did you know that these graphs are in medical journals? And did you know that they've been taken out of the medical journals? So what caused this drop? Florence Nightingale. Have you looked at pictures from the mid-1800s? Children were playing in the streets of London in the filth. Sewage was there. People would wash once every 6 months, if that. And in 1850, all the sewage from London went into the Thames, and the people living in London drank the water from the Thames. No wonder the Black Plague happened. That's why we need to know our history, and on the tip of our lips should be, why are these things so? There's no need to reinvent the wheel, it's been invented. We look back at history. I was reading a book recently, a couple of months ago, on the siege of Malta, and this was in about the 1400s. And the Muslims were coming and fighting the knights on Malta. And what I found interesting is that the Knights of Malta had strict cleanliness rules because they read the Bible. And so in their hospitals there was cleanliness, there was hygiene, but in the makeshift hospitals of the Muslims there was disease, there was a lot of sickness because they didn't have those strict cleanliness rules. We've got another graph today. It's attention deficit syndrome, hyperactivity, autism, cot death, epilepsy. Where's that coming from? Well, unfortunately today, children are getting... That's why it's important to know the cycle of life. What does the preacher say at the funeral? Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. He's referring to what's going to happen in the coffin. Very soon, that body in the coffin is going to be dust. You see, these microorganisms were an integral part of living, running person. Upon death of the organism, then they change roles. They come the garbage collectors, the clean-up team, the exterminators, and eventually they're brought matter back to dust. There was a contemporary at the time of Florence Nightingale and Louis Pasteur. His name was Antoine Beauchamp. He was also a Frenchman, and his 6 times professor took 9 pages of reading as his accomplishments in his lifetime, and yet most people have never heard of him. Most people liked Louis Pasteur's theory. What's Louis Pasteur's theory? Oh, you're sick. A germ has jumped on you, made you sick. Take this drug to kill the germ and all will be well. Can you see that it takes away all responsibility on the person for what's happening in their body? But no one really liked what Antoine Beauchamp said. He said disease is born innocent of us. Well, no one really liked that. What Antoine Beauchamp said, what time are you going to bed? How much water are you drinking? What food are you eating? Because we are what we are because of all that. Antoine Beauchamp was doing experiments. One day he got a dead cat and he wrapped it up in an airtight container. So let me tell you what would happen to a cat if it died in the Australian bush. Maybe it fell out of a tree and knocked its head, I don't know, but it died. So if a cat dies in Australia in the bush, the dingoes come along and have a nibble, the kookaburra has a nibble, the crow has a nibble, the dung beetles come up and start the breakdown. The blowfly lays its maggots and they start eating away. Aren't these all the what they call the vultures that are cleaning up? And also worms would come up till eventually the matter's brought back to dust. But with Antoine Beauchamp, the cat was in an airtight container. After 4 months, he opened the container. Dust. What brought cat back to dust? The microorganisms are an integral part of living, running cat. Upon death of the organism, which is the ultimate cell damage, now they change roles. They take their suit of clothes off, so to speak, put their rubber gloves and apron on, and they become the clean-up team. As the environment changes, the exterminators, as the environment changes, the undertakers, until eventually they're brought matter back to dust. It's the cycle of life. With great excitement, Antoine Beauchamp put the dust under the microscope. It was alive with microorganisms. Remember that basic law of science? Nothing's created, nothing's destroyed. It just changes form. And it changes form according to the environment. I have 3 compost bins at home. One I'm adding to scraps from the kitchen, weeds from the garden, maybe some cow manure from the farmer down the road because he doesn't use any chemicals. And then the next compost bin, it's a yard by yard by yard, so they're big compost bins. So the middle compost bin, it's sitting. It's just waiting for matter to be brought back to dust. And then the third compost bin, it's ready to go into my garden. I know because pumpkin plants are coming up, pawpaw plants are coming up, tomato plants are springing up. It's ready to go in the garden. And I pick it up and I smell it, and it smells like earth. I was reading one book on compost, and they say we always get women to smell it. They've got a keener sense of smell. And so let's have a look at what happens when I put that into my garden. Here's a plant in my garden. Now, if I have a crop of tomato in my soil, and all the tomatoes are picked, and the tomato plant dies, before I put another crop in, and by the way, if I have a top crop, the next crop I put in will be a root crop. So you alternate it, because different plants take different nutrients out of the soil. But before I put another crop in, I feed the soil. I shovel loads of compost and dig it into the soil. And what am I doing when I do that? I'm putting little microorganisms into my soil, because that's what my compost is full of, microorganisms. And those microorganisms, they now play another role. They are responsible for the breakdown of the minerals in the dirt. And they are responsible for the absorption of the minerals into the roots of the plant. They also protect the plant against harmful pathogens. Is this sounding familiar? They nourish the plant. And the plant knows that it needs those microorganisms, so 50% of the fuel that it makes according to photosynthesis, it sends back down to the roots to feed the plant. It's almost as if the plant says, please stay, I'll feed you well. Because that plant knows that it needs those microorganisms to be able to access the minerals out of the soil and into the plant. It's an amazing process. So my daughter Jessica, one of her little girls, whenever she put little lotus on the grass, while she put the clothes on the line, little lotus would put her finger in between the grass, get dirt and eat it. And the next day when Jessica changed her nappy, you call it a diaper, what was in the nappy? Dirt. Because remember, our gastrointestine is a hollow tube. Goes in one end and out the other. And we cannot access the minerals in the dirt. We can't access it. But God made an amazing process in these little microorganisms. They have the ability to break down those minerals and cause them to be absorbed into the plant. They protect the plant against any harmful pathogens that might be in the soil, and they nourish the plant. The law of service is written on every plant in nature. Every plant in nature takes with one reason: it takes to give. A beautiful lesson for humanity. What does the Bible say? Freely you have received, freely give. So these microorganisms are actually not our enemy. These microorganisms are an important part of life on the planet and life in the body. In our last lecture, we looked at the lining of the gastrointestinal tract and noticed that these villoes that line the gastrointestinal tract, They look very much like the roots of the plant, and they play a similar role. And they are aligned with microorganisms. Remember those Lactobacillus acidophilus and bifidus bacterium? That's the microorganisms that line the gut. And in our last lecture, we looked at how they are responsible for the exact same thing that they do in the soil. They're responsible for the breakdown, the final breakdown of our food, not the full breakdown. When we went on our journey through our gastrointestinal tract earlier in the week, we looked at all the enzymes that do that. No, these microorganisms, they cause a release of B vitamins. These microorganisms in the gut, they are responsible for the production of melatonin, and we looked this morning at the importance of melatonin for rest and rejuvenation in the body. They also cause a production of a very important glutathione, which is probably considered the most powerful antioxidant, glutathione. Considering all of this, are you starting to see that these microorganisms are not the enemy? They are actually a very important part of life on planet Earth. And without them, there's actually no life. So rather than seeing them as the enemy, if they are out of control, we should be asking, why are they out of control? Because the fact is, they are just opportunist organisms. You'll only find them where there's something to clean up. So when we are keeping the Sustain Me principles, breathing through the nose, drinking adequate water, having sun every day, not taking any stimulants, going to bed early, exercising every day, when we're keeping those Sustain Me principles, this living machinery, it runs very well. And any waste that happens, we sweat it out because we're exercising every day. We urinate it out easily because we're drinking adequate water. Our colon is evacuating 2 or 3 times a day, so the waste is coming out. But if we are not drinking adequate water, if we are not eating nourishing food, if we are not exercising, if we are not getting adequate sleep, then waste can build up in the body. Which means there's something for these guys to do now. They've got to start to work on that waste. And as they work on their waste, they might call on some neutrophils, they might call on some lymphocytes to actually help clean it up. So when someone says to me, Barbara, what can I do for inflammation? I say, well, it all depends on why the inflammation is there. Because remember Proverbs 26 verse 2, the curse causeless shall not come. No inflammation happens in the body without a cause. Things don't just happen. It's just like, let's say there was a watermark up on the roof there. And so the builder comes in and paints over it. 2 weeks later it comes back. So he paints over it again. Is that fixing the problem? No, it's not fixing the problem, because eventually the roof falls in. Because he didn't find out why the watermark is there. So when there's a problem in your body, it's your body speaking to you saying, excuse me, can you do something about this? Excuse me, can you attend to that? But the problem is today, so many people don't know how to attend to it. And I was confronted with that when I sat in emergency for 6 hours with my broken arm. In fact, if everyone knew how to look after their body, I probably would have been seen in 1 hour. I thank God I didn't know I was going to sit there for 6. One of the most common medications that it's used today is antibiotics. And I'd like to have a look at what it is, how it was discovered, and the role it plays. But first of all, let's have a look at what this word means. It means against life. That's what the word means. And if we're living organisms, we've got to get away from the kill mentality. Because anything that has the ability to kill a small organism has the potential to kill a large. So, where did antibiotics come from? Alexander Fleming, 1929, he's growing bacteria in flasks in his laboratory. He came in one morning and all his bacteria was dead. And he, as every true scientist said, why? Why is bacteria dead? He looked around the laboratory, nothing there could have done it, but there was an open window near his flasks. And the sun was coming in, it was early morning, and there was a heavy dust on the sun's rays that was settling on his bacteria, so he searched. And he found in the next story there was an open window, and in the open window there was a plate of fruit, and in the plate of fruit there was a mouldy orange. Do you remember the story from school days? We all learnt it. So that mouldy orange was giving off a dust. And in that dust was its spore, but in that dust was a highly toxic gas designed to kill off anything that would compete with the mole's food source. It's almost as if the mole says, this is my orange, no one else is going to get it. I'm going to give off this toxic gas to kill anything that might try and get my orange. What might try and get his orange? Other bacterias. So it settled on the bacteria in the flask, in the laboratory, and it killed it. And what Alexander Fleming did, he called the mould penicillium. And he called the mould waste, which is more toxic than the mould, he called the mould waste penicillic acid. And this penicillic acid is the penicillin that we know today. And penicillin has saved the lives of probably millions now. Absolutely. And it will continue, but we've got a problem today. And it's the overuse of the antibiotics. You see, mould waste, in medical terms, is called a mycotoxin. What's a toxin? It's a poison. And when you think about it, these microorganisms, they have the ability to adapt and adjust. So if bacteria is out of control, let's say someone's got, we'll call urinary tract infection. So someone has a urinary tract infection. There's bacteria in their urine, so they're given an antibiotic. Yes, that kills the bacteria. 3 weeks later, another urinary tract infection. Go back to the doctor, another course of antibiotics. And I know Jacqueline was telling me her stories. She wasn't drinking enough water. This is years ago. She was living on junk. And antibiotic after antibiotic after antibiotic after antibiotic for urinary tract infection. Does that make any sense? See, what happens is, you put the antibiotic there, it kills the bacteria, but some of the bacteria actually adapt and adjust and get stronger and become immune to the antibiotics. And that's what the World Health Organization claim, that the biggest health care risk today is the overuse of antibiotics, to the point that there are some people that are becoming immune to antibiotics. So when they are needed, they're actually not working. And with Jacqueline, she tells the story that it got to the point she was put on a very heavy dose. In fact, I think it was 2 courses at once, very heavy. She started to lose her eyesight. She was only in her late 30s. She went to the eye doctor, and the eye doctor said, there's nothing wrong with your eyes. But she stood She sat and thought about it, and I think it all happens to all of us. What's going on? All the princes have is more antibiotics, more antibiotics, and more antibiotics. And what's the definition of insanity? To do what you've always done and expect different results is not working. So she decided to drink more water. She started to change her diet. And she found a product that was concentrated cranberry. It's called D-mannose. And what she did, she took a teaspoon every half hour in water until the pain stopped. And then she took it 3 times a day and her urinary tract infection went away. But notice she had to stop the cause. Remember that little formula found in the Ministry of Healing? In case of sickness, cause should be ascertained. Her cause was she wasn't drinking enough water and she was eating food that was devitalised. So her body didn't have the basic nutrients to heal. And she got to the point where her back was against the wall. The doctor had no more. She was starting to go blind. And the more antibiotics she took, the more urinary tract infections she took. It's not working. And that was one of the things that got her on the path of looking after her body. Psalm 104 verse 14, God gave herbs for the service of man. What that cranberry does is it forms a slippery lining to the bladder. So those little bacteria can't grab onto that bladder. And if it's not working, take more. Notice what she did. She took a teaspoon every half hour. She's never had another antibiotic. Her experience showed this is not working. See, these microorganisms, they have the ability to adapt and adjust. So we need to know them, to understand them, and to work with them. When someone takes an antibiotic, it's not unusual that they will get thrush. And that's because what have they just taken? A mould waste. The body can cope with 2 or 3 courses in a lifetime. Did everyone hear that? 2 or 3 courses in a lifetime. I'm not against antibiotics. They can be used absolutely in a crisis to save a life. But I learned a whole lot of little bits and pieces I can do in the rainforest so that my children didn't need antibiotics. I've had several mothers say to me, Barbara, my daughter's got strep throat. I said, what's this strep throat? When I was little, it was called sore throat. Yeah? She said, the doctor said that if I don't give my child the antibiotics, my child, the streptococci, could go to the brain. So the mother gave the child antibiotics because of this, yeah? Do you know that sore throat's no different to the sore throat I had as a child? It's no different to the sore throat that my mother had as a child. It's just a sore throat. And in 1940s, in Salisbury, England, they set up the Common Cold Research Unit to find the cause and the cure of the common cold. So what they did was they'd get people and they'd put them in a hot bath, and then they'd take them out and put them in the cold air with a breeze on them, and they wouldn't get a cold. So then what they did was they got someone that had a bad cold, scraped the throat, put it into the throat of that person, put them in a hot bath, out in the cold air. They didn't get a cold. You see, do you know what a cold is? It's just a house clean. It's just a house clean. That's why after 40 years they closed down in disgrace, because they could not find the cause and the cure of the common cold. It's just a house clean. In that page in the book of Ministry of Healing, in the chapter, the physician, the educator, after the sentence, let the physicians teach the people that restorative power lies not in drugs, but in nature. The next sentence is, disease is an effort of nature to free the system from conditions that arise because of a violation of the basic laws of health. Yeah. A violation of the basic laws of health, not drinking enough water, going to bed too late, not eating nourishing food, not getting sunshine, not exercising, because they're the basic conditions required for the proper functioning of the human body. People say to me, how do you keep up the pace, Barbara? I say, I found a formula. And this formula sustains me. And my book, Sustain Me, is an acronym for those basic laws of health. Florence Nightingale, she said, disease is a process of repair, not necessarily accompanied by suffering. She said, if the patient suffers, it's the nurse's fault for not applying the laws of nursing. And those laws of nursing basically are the laws of health. Dr. Jackson from America in the mid-1800s, he called them the laws of life. What are they? They're the Sustain Me principles: sunshine, use of water, sleep, trust in God, stop anything that harms, inhale through the nose, proper nutrition, moderation in all the good things, exercise. And in that chapter, the physician, the educator, the author says, these are the true remedies. They're the true remedies. So when a child gets a sore throat, make sure they're drinking lots of water. What did we do when we were little and we had a sore throat? We'd have a lemon and honey drink, is that right? And we'd eat very lightly, maybe just watermelon. Have a big sleep in the middle of the day. You give the body the right conditions and your house clean will actually be accomplished very quickly. Because the healing powers that are in the body that seal a cut, that heal a broken bone, and look, my wrist is healed now. Do you know what an orthopaedic surgeon said to me one day? He said, we can set a bone, we can't heal it. That is true. It's the body and the body alone that can heal. Germs don't cause disease. They're the result of unhealthful conditions. And the CDC, the Centre of Disease Control, they have stated that 99, got that figure? 99% of people that get COVID recover. Did you hear that? So what's the problem? The ones that go down are the ones that have pre-existing health conditions. It just basically tipped the scales. You've heard of the straw that broke the camel's back. A piece of straw can't break a camel's back, but on the end of all of the other things, it'll tip the scales. So in 2021, a double-vaxxed man attended our program, and he had a headache the first day. Not unusual. When people are coming off caffeine, it's quite common. Our guest come in Sunday. He had a headache all day Monday. Our exercise coordinator woke him up on Tuesday morning. He said, Howard, I'm terribly sorry. I've just given myself a test. I've got COVID. He said, I'm happy to stay in my room. We said, okay. We delivered drinks, juices. But that first 36 hours of contact, half of the staff went down, half of the guests went down. The US Senate have stated that, and you've probably read this, that COVID was tampered with in the Wuhan laboratory. So it seems that this microorganism was tampered with to make it maybe a little bit stronger than most, but it's actually a virus. And the virus is part of the clean-up team in the body. My husband got it. He went straight down and had a test. Yes, he was positive. He was very happy. In fact, he did a podcast on it and said, I am so happy I've got COVID. Because he knew he lived in a body that could heal itself. 24 hours later, I went down. Have you noticed when a cold goes around or a flu goes around, some will get it and some won't? The ones that get it are the ones that they're ready for a house clean. Why did I get it? Well, I fly a lot. It was time for a house clean. The first 24 hours I had a terrible headache, so I just laid in bed. The second day I had a terrible fever. Do you know, fever is a wonderful thing. Fever boosts your immune system. It's a wonderful thing we created in our guests every day in the steam sauna. We create a fever. They go in the steam sauna, they get very hot, they dive in the mountain stream, back in the steam sauna, dive in the mountain stream, back in the steam sauna. It goes on for about 40 minutes. We get their temperature up really nice and high. Why? Because as you saw in that last presentation, that alternating hot and cold is the best boost for our immune system, which is produced in our bone marrow. So I had a fever. People say, "What did you do?" I said, "Nothing. I live in a body that can heal itself." I slept a lot. I drank a lot of water. And I hardly ate anything. I think the first day by 4 in the afternoon I got hungry and I had a banana. I think that's it. See, when you're not eating, that 1,200 calories that is required to digest a meal looks around the body and starts fixing it, repairs it. That's why fasting has been used for centuries, to create or to boost healing in the body. So third day, fever. Did I take my temperature? No, I never take my temperature. I just knew I was hot. What's it going to do to take your temperature? And if I started to get too hot, I'd just have not a hot shower, not a cold shower, just a tepid shower. And that would bring my temperature down a little bit so I was comfortable. I was happy to have a fever because that fever is a huge immune system booster, and that fever burns off any pathogens that might be in the body. Yep, viruses. Fourth day, I woke up. Oh, I wasn't hot anymore. Don't need to take a temperature. I never took my children's temperature. Do you need to take a temperature to see if they got a fever? No, you can tell they got a fever. They're hot. They're uncomfortable. So when someone says, "Barbara, they've got this temperature," I said, "Stop taking the temperature. Just put them in a tepid bath. Just cool them down a little bit." But what if they get hot an hour later? Put them back in the bath. You see, fever needs to run its course. And when it's burnt up all the rubbish, guess what? The fire will go out. And what's the best thing to put a fire out? Water. Water on the inside, water on the outside. It's very simple. Fourth day, I was very tired. No wonder when you have a fever, it's like you've climbed a couple of mountains. If I sat down for half an hour, I could do something for 10 minutes. Fifth day, if I sat down for 10 minutes, I could do something for half an hour. Sixth day, I'm feeling fantastic. Seventh day, I'm jumping out of my skin with energy. I'd had a wonderful house clean. Did everyone hear that? That's what it is. In 1 Thessalonians 5:18, the Bible says, "In everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you." It's a house clean. The whole world shut down in 2020 because of that. A virus. But there was no need. I trust we all see it now. The media would like us to think that all the problems were solved because of a certain shot. And the media will not tell you this because it seems to me that the media are on the pharmaceutical company's payroll. But the fact is, there have been more deaths to the shot than actually to the flu, that type of flu. And when you consider that some car accidents were told they died of COVID, My daughter's neighbour, 12-year-old son, drowned. And they put it on the death certificate, died of COVID. Parents were very upset. They said he drowned. And you know what the paramedics said? We tested him and he was positive. Of course he will be positive. Because every dead person will test positive. Because as soon as there's the death of the organism, the ultimate cell damage, what starts happening? The cycle of life. And what's part of the cycle of life? The yeast, the fungus, the viruses, they're there to bring matter back to dust. Of course they'll test positive. Proverbs 14 verse 6 says, knowledge is easy to him that understands. When you understand the cycle of life, when you understand the role of these microorganisms in the body and the role they play, you do not need to fear them anymore. Because when you give the body the right conditions, we've got an amazing immune system that is able to handle it. We've got an amazing body. We've even got water treatments which actually work with the body to boost your immune system. We've got herbs that God gave us that can work with the body to bring about that healing condition. So there is no need to fear these microorganisms. You see, these are the players in the cycle of life. These are the performers in the cycle of life. And if it wasn't for these microorganisms, there'd be so much rubbish or trash on the planet, we wouldn't be able to walk on the planet. They're the good guys, they're not the bad guys. That's why Florence Nightingale said when she read of Louis Pasteur's theory, she said, this is the theory of a man of a very unstable mind. And anyone who believes it is equally unstable because it basically defies reason. It makes no sense at all. These microorganisms are an integral part of life on planet Earth, of life in the human body. And we need to work with them, not against them. Yes, in a crisis, a drug may save a life. Yes, in a crisis, an antibiotic can save a life. But as the World Health Organization have stated, the biggest health care risk today is the overuse of antibiotics. Before I was banned in Australia in July 2019, there were 4 doctors that used to get me to go to their town and give health meetings because they knew if the average person knew how to look after their body, the simple things that can be done to bring about healing, then the nurses and the doctors wouldn't be overrun in emergency. So they particularly got me to go to their towns to teach the people how their bodies work, to teach the people how to look after their bodies, to teach the people that the human body has been designed by God to heal itself. We just need the right conditions. Unfortunately, many people are not aware of those conditions. And when you give the body the right conditions, these microorganisms, yes, they'll be in your body, but they'll be playing the proper role. But whenever cell damage happens, whenever waste builds up in the body, then the cleanup team has to start working. And if the person treads on a rusty nail, don't stop and look at it for days. It'll get big, it'll get red, it'll get swollen, there'll be pus and there'll be pain. No, just start doing the hot and colds. Put a grated potato poultice on it every night, which will draw it out. And then there'll be no need to go to emergency. There'll be no need to take the drugs. Because as soon as it happened, you started to work on that straight away. This is what people did a couple of 100 years ago, is that right? But unfortunately, it was all lumped together with things like bloodletting. Yes, we know that bloodletting, well, that doesn't actually make any sense, does it? Why let out the blood when the blood is the life of the flesh? But we've come to a time on planet Earth where a lot of people are being challenged and getting frustrated with the fact that medicine is actually not working. And they're looking at alternatives. And some people stop going to the doctor and stop taking the drug, and they'll go to the naturopath and just want the herbal tablet. But the herbal tablet isn't the healer, it's the body that's the healer when it's given the right conditions. In my book, Self-Heal by Design, I explore this in much greater detail. In my book, Sustain Me, it's basically a handbook on natural remedies that shows what you can do for different ailments in the body. There's an index at the back, and you can easily look up it there. I know in our last venue, some people were buying 6 each. I said, "What's this?" They said, "Christmas presents." It's a wonderful Christmas present that every home has this little manual in it to know what to do when the body doesn't work. I'd like to start questions now. We have time for a few questions before we close. This screen's getting even more amazing. I didn't even do anything. A friend is in early stage of dementia, likely caused by anti-seizure medication that she has been on for many years. What can help? And this is true. Many are sick because of side effects of medications, which is unfortunate. For instance, Fosimax, which is a drug given to women in Australia for osteoporosis, and it causes the jaw to start breaking down. And yet in my book, Sustain Me, there's a chapter showing how you can build better bones. But what this person can do for this dementia, because I guess the problem is they stop the anti-seizure meds and they start to have seizures. But in his book, Stop Alzheimer's Now, Dr. Bruce Fife shows that the ketogenic diet, it's been used for over 100 years to help control seizures, to help control epilepsy. So the question often is asked, well, why isn't that the first thing tried when someone has seizures? Because it's been proven to be very effective. So that's what I would look at, is I would get his book, Stop Alzheimer's Now by Dr. Bruce Fife. What causes diverticulitis? The small bulging patches in the colon, is it dangerous? How can it be healed? Is colonoscopy recommended? Colonoscopies are not recommended. Colonoscopy will never ever heal you. It's just a test. And if you don't have irritable bowel, you often will have irritable bowel after you drink the drink you've got to drink before you have the colonoscopy. I would never recommend a colonoscopy. There is no need. Diverticulitis is often revealed because of pain. So what the person must do is they look at when they have the pain and what was their last meal. Are they drinking adequate water? You see, you can do much by making a food diary and just noting when do you get the pain, what food causes the pain. Colonic irrigations is a bowel treatment. It's a bowel treatment of water going in and out of the colon for about 40 minutes, and that is the most effective way to conquer diverticulitis. But if the person can't find a colonic irrigationist, they can have an enema. An enema is just putting warm water into the colon, maybe 2 cups, massaging the colon and letting it run out. But if the person just notes what things hurt and what things do not hurt and stick to the best foods. What are the causes of tinnitus? With a full feeling in the head as if underwater, and what can be helped to relieve it. Tinnitus is often caused by damage to the fine mechanisms in the ear. Sometimes years ago, every rock singer has it, because what are they exposed to? very loud noises. People that have been through wars often have it because of the noise of bombs. Men that have used jackhammers, that loud noise is damaging the fine mechanisms in the ear. And those fine mechanisms in the ear, once they're damaged, it's very difficult to fully repair them. But you can manage it by keeping the eustachian tubes clear. The eustachian tubes are the tubes that connect the ears and the eyes and the nose and the mouth. How do you keep them clear? You stop those 5 allergens. So when you eliminate the wheat, oats, dairy, peanuts, refined sugar, it may take 2 months. There'll be a clearing of eustachian tubes. And also, you can sniff golden seal powder. Golden seal powder sniffed up into the sinus areas helps to clear it out. In my book, Sustain Me, I have a chapter on tinnitus. Cysts on a dog. Castor oil compresses can actually help cysts on a dog. These questions are all familiar. I think we've already looked at these. Is fluency, stammering and stutting in a 5-year-old? Do you know, it's very important never to pressure a 5-year-old. Never pressure them. Do you know what I find? They get it together. They get it together. They eventually get it together. Can castor oil on the scalp get rid of brain tumours? It certainly can help. Your story about your friend Anne recently hit home. My mother died of a massive brain tumour. I think you have a video that says castor oil poultice. Castor oil poultice can certainly get rid of a fibroid tumour in the uterus, and castor oil can penetrate the skull. It can penetrate deep and it can break up any unnatural formations. Not overnight, but little by little by little it can. Okay, we did those questions earlier. I refuse the title CPTSD. My title is PIHS, Precious in His Sight. My question is, what are your thoughts on how common emotional abuse in the church is and how to calm the limbic system? I tell you a really good way to calm the emotions, deep breathing. I call it God's LSD, long, slow, deep. Breathing through the nose and breathing long, slow and deep, that stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. And the parasympathetic nervous system is your calming nervous system. Breathing like this, high chest through the mouth, that stimulates the sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight and flight nervous system. What recommendations do you have to increase iron absorption? My ferritin level is very low. Ferritin is a name given to iron stores, and iron is stored with protein. Most people that have low iron, low hemoglobin, low ferritin stores, it's because they have low hydrochloric acid. And in my book, Sustain Me, I have a chapter on anemia, and I explain that process in detail. So boosting hydrochloric acid can often help to actually conquer anemia. What recommendations do you have for a child who every time he gets sick, he gets croup, frequently progresses to pneumonia? A common cause of excess mucus in the respiratory is an allergy to those 5 allergens. So that's the first thing I would do, is stop those 5 allergens. And remember, it can take 2 months to see a result. My husband's suffered with AS for 8 years, getting worse. His spine is fusing. I read your chapter on arthritis, but there is a way to reverse fusing. Do you know, it's keeping that body agile. Exercise is vital. Moving that spine, also rubbing castor oil into it, keeping well hydrated, because it's synovial fluid that's between each joint. And synovial fluid is 99% water, so that's what you would check, all of those things. Turmeric, the only painkiller? Well, there is another painkiller, and that's called cayenne pepper. Cayenne pepper is an analgesic. And if one capsule of cane pepper doesn't reduce your pain, try 2. That doesn't do it, try 3, try 4. Remember what the doctor said, you can't abuse it. What is the best way to combat osteoarthritis and inflammation of the hip bursa due to an accident 2 years ago? Often when there's been an accident, there's scar tissue build-up, and that's where castor oil can be very effective. And castor oil can be applied to the hip area. You might need some stretchy booty underwear to hold it into place, but castor oil is very good at breaking up bone spurs, breaking up scar tissue. For the past 4 months I've been struggling to get rid of a yeast infection, fungal in my toenails, fingernails. Any correlation? What is the best treatment? In my book, Self-Heal by Design, I have programs, dietary programs and herbs that you can take to conquer yeast and fungus in the body. 2.5 years ago I had a complete hysterectomy. 56 took everything, my cervix up. I've been on a bioidentical HRT. Wonder if you have any recommendations for alternate hormonal balances. In the website barbaro'neill.com you can order Comfort Cream. And Comfort Wild Yam Cream will naturally work with the body and bring back a balance. That is the best thing to take. The 9 to 2 AM sweet spot for sleep, is there any way to make it up for people who work nights? I know someone has to work nights, but if you do have to work nights, ideally you don't do it a lot. Ideally there's shift work, so everyone does a little bit each. And in my book, Sustain Me, I have a chapter on sweet sleep, and I show how that exercise in the day increases the release of those hormones at night, keeping well hydrated. And so looking at how, as much as possible, you can implement those while you do night duty. The question is, change jobs? Yeah, that's probably what I do. Is there scientific evidence that microwave reheating leftovers is harmful? You can do your own scientific experiments. You get 2 little plants. They're identical. One of them you water a couple of times a week with water. The other one you only water with microwaved water. And the microwaved watered plant will not live long. There's your scientific study. Doctor said we should clean out our sperm. 6 to 8 times a month. How do you clean out your sperm? Sorry, I don't know what that means. Maybe you clean out your sperm by drinking lots of water, by keeping the laws of health. You'll certainly get better quality sperm. I was told that dark circles under the eyes are hereditary. 5%. They're applying to the genes today. Isn't that good news? Because if our disease was due to genes, that would take away free choice. And God's government, being a government of freedom, is based on free choice. Genetics may load the gun, but it is lifestyle that pulls the trigger. We can turn our genes on and off by the way we treat our bodies. It's called epigenetics, that study. Often the dark circles under the eye, well, this lady says they're worse when she doesn't get enough sleep. Yes. And also it can be worse when you're not drinking enough water. I was told at the age of 51 that I needed a hip replacement as the bones in the joint are rubbing together, and I was given no other options. I also have pinched nerves in my lower back, send shooting pain down my leg, sometimes cause my knees to buckle. What can be done? One of the best things you can do for your back is strengthen your core muscles. All your core muscles are connected to your spine. That's why it's important to do push-ups every day. That's why I can't do push-ups at the moment because my broken rib won't let me. But because I usually do push-ups every day, I know that I won't lose my core strength, because I would say within maybe another 5 weeks that those ribs will be healed. So strengthening your core is one of the best ways to strengthen your spine. A lady wrote to me and she said, Barbara, what can I do? I've got back pain, I've got slip disc. She did not like my answer. I said, it's time to start working your core. Every day, strengthen your core until it gets very strong. And the biggest bones in the body are the femur. Biggest muscle mass in the body is our quads. And God made it so that when we bend or lift here. Have you seen how a 2-year-old picks up a ball? They pick up a ball like that. They use their thighs. How do we pick up balls? And that weakens the back. Many people weaken their back by not lifting and bending properly. So strength to do that comes from the core and comes from the quads. So it's time to work the quads, even just going almost down, almost up, almost down, almost up, almost down, almost up. You do that even every hour 10 times and you'll strengthen your quads. And do your push-ups every day, you'll strengthen your core. And that's how you can manage back. My grandson said he would not see. He could not see. And then simply passed out. He came back around and they took him to the hospital and they said he fainted and called it syncope, whatever that means. Is there anything that can improve the tendency towards that? I have the same issue if I stand in one place very long. I would look at hydration, because hydration can cause it, lack of minerals can cause it, lack of sleep can cause it. So that's when you investigate. That's the beauty of those laws of health. Whenever there's a problem, you bring up those laws and you compare the life of the person with the problem against those laws. 6'1", 130 pound, how can I gain weight healthy? Often people need to boost their hydrochloric acid to be able to gain weight, because our muscles are built by amino acids, which comes from the protein. So it's one thing to eat adequate protein, legumes, nuts, seeds every meal, but it's also important to boost your hydrochloric acid so you're breaking down that protein. So you can boost hydrochloric acid by taking a little bit of hot ginger tea just before the meal, taking a 1/3 of a teaspoon of cayenne pepper in a little water just before the meal, taking the juice of a lemon just before the meal, not all of them together, one or the other, but that boosts it. And also leave a break between meals. Ideally, we should have about a 5-hour break between meals. Is the implant birth control considered plastic? The implant birth control is incredibly dangerous. Incredibly dangerous. Please have that removed as quickly as possible. In my book, Sustain Me, I have a chapter on hormones. I show how you can balance them, and this lady will need to go on the yam cream to rebalance her hormones. And also in that chapter, I show natural birth control methods. And there's even a QR card where you can download a chart and start charting your monthly signs to know when you're ovulating. Can the birth control implant damage the reproduction of babies in the future? It can. It certainly can. But probably the main person that it disrupts is the person. Could you tell me what helps with hair loss in women? There's a chapter in my book on hair loss. Hair loss can be caused by a few things. It can be caused by a hormonal imbalance. It can be caused by damage to the follicles, by perming the hair, by colouring the hair, putting chemicals on. But also sodium lauryl sulfate is a chemical that's put in shampoo to make it foam up. That kills hair follicles. Could you please tell me what helps boost testosterone in men and women? Keeping the laws of health is important in keeping a proper hormonal balance in the body, but also the yam cream. And BarbaraO'Neill.com, that website, sells the Comfort Yam Cream, and the Comfort Yam Cream helps to balance the hormones. Also, they are selling now a man yam cream. So it's very similar to the ladies, because men and ladies, their number one hormone is both progesterone. But in the man yam cream, they've added some specific herbs for the prostate, so it helps very much in that area. So I'd like to finish with a word of prayer. Father in heaven, thank you so much for what you've taught us. Thank you so much for this incredible body that you've given us. Maybe we each inspired to take a more careful look, to make a more serious look at our body and what we can do to get the best out of it, what conditions we can give our bodies so that we can be testimonies of what Jesus said in John 10:10, that he came to give life and that we might have it more abundantly. Thank you for teaching us, and we pray these things tonight in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you.